Welcome back, baseball fans, to another edition of the Prep Baseball Report of North Carolina podcast. I'm Brandon Hall. He's Matt Payne, and we've got a ton of information and things to talk about with baseball going across of the state, also across the country. A lot of big news going to affect maybe not the senior class, but definitely the next 2 to 3 classes as they start to age up with the NCAA making some waves this week. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good. Happy to be back on.
Big week, kind of back to norms for us. I know you and I have been sitting and writing a lot, trying to get some not podcasts, but scout blogs out. But we also have rankings coming out soon for some of our younger classes, and then team rankings. And let's jump right into the Power 25. Some major shakeups down, especially towards the bottom of those rankings. But as we start, let's start at the top. East Forsyth and Wake Forest maintain 1 and 2. Middle Creek moves up from 5 to 3. What did you think of those 3 clubs as you were kind of reviewing all the information of the past couple weeks?
East Forsyth went to Myrtle Beach for their spring break, and big wins down there. They just keep rolling along. We saw Wake Forest at battle at the Boneyard, and they've seemed to blow everybody out lately. And so much depth in that lineup. And Middle Creek continues to play well. They have. I like what they can do offensively. It'll be interesting to see how they piece it together pitching wise the rest of the year.
Another team that you saw at the Battle of the Big Rock that you raved about, New Hanover, jumps from number 10 to number 5. What did you like about the Wildcats?
Old club, 2 really good arms on the front end, and then they have Luke Nixon back now who can really play shortstop, and he also threw a couple innings in relief. Gives them a bullpen arm to go along with Tate Nelson, the freshman we saw at a preseason All-State event, and they blew out South Brunswick last night 8-0, and they seem to be hitting their stride right now at the right time.
Let's jump down towards the bottom a little bit. We've got one, two, three, four, 5 teams that were not ranked when we did the rankings 3 weeks ago that are now ranked. 4 of those teams seeing their first time in the rankings this year. What is it, about let's start with Orange High School. They were in the ranking, they struggled a little bit, and then you look back up and they're 15-2, and we've got them back up to 17.
Yeah, we put them in. They were playing well, and what's happened a lot this year, we put teams in and they lose. But since that loss, they've been rolling, and the numbers some of their guys have put up have been impressive. And what jumped out to me was they beat Lee County and beat Walker McDuffie. And
Yep.
we like Lee County a lot and love Walker McDuffie, and they got a big win there. So I like how they're playing right now.
Yeah, and Lee County, another Power 25 team coming in at 24 this week. You saw Topsail, 11-5, kind of a modest record to be entering at number 19, but it's a club that I think has kind of hit their stride here in the last couple of weeks, found their momentum, found who they are. You got a chance to bear down on them a little bit, I think, at the Big Rock. Was that one of the clubs that you saw?
Yeah, I got to see Topsail play a couple times, and you go through and you look at the league they're in with New Hanover. I know South Brunswick struggled a little bit lately, but they're no slouch, and Hoggard's in that league as well, and Ashley and some of those clubs that are very competitive. And I like the athleticism in their lineup. They got Cooper Kavanaugh and Rhett Britt on the mound that can shut you down, and I like their athleticism. And anytime you match up in that league the way they have, and they're currently first place in that league. I like what they can do come postseason time.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot. When they got into league play, and it's something that I think Wake Forest was doing earlier in the year too. Not necessarily playing to win every single game, but playing to figure out who they are. What's our identity? Changing the lineup up, changing the rotation up, giving some guys some shots at the front end versus the back end. And then all of a sudden, when we get into league play, we know who we are. We know how we're going to go about our business. And you've seen Wake Forest take off, and obviously Topsail sitting at the top of that league says a lot about the talent on that club. A couple of the other newly ranked teams, number 18, Terry Sanford, I had a chance to see play at their own. They host an Easter tournament, spring break tournament. Very deep club. They've got some youth, not a ton of seniors that are. I don't want to term it the wrong way because their seniors are leaders, but I don't think they're their most highly regarded prospects. They have a catcher that can really catch and throw, but their younger classes kind of lead their talent pool. Probably lack a pure power arm on the front end. but they have some depth on the mound. And so, again, 17-3 and playing a fairly competitive schedule. We'll kind of see where they land. Another club I've seen a couple times now, Weddington. Again, the arms don't scare you, but they're able to run out 5, 6 different guys that have a chance to get outs. Max Luzaraga is their first baseman. I want to say a 2024 left-handed hitter, maybe a 25. But he swung the bat and stabilized the middle of their order a little bit. They've got athleticism at the top and the bottom of the order. The lineup has depth. There's no just general outs, just throw strikes as God get himself out. None of those in their lineup. And again, with their conference slate playing 3 games a week, it's a team that's going to be battle tested. And then finally, for me, 22, High Point Christian, up from 24 a couple weeks ago, sitting at 18-2. They went down to the was it Mingo Bay Classic in Myrtle Beach and won that tournament, which is a prestigious tournament. And I think if Story, their right-handed senior, is committed to Wingate, is a true legitimate ace like he has been up to this point of the year, we may be light on them. That was kind of the big question. They've got a left-handed heavy lineup. They've got the ability to score runs by hitting balls in the gap. Athleticism and putting pressure on you may be lacking a little bit, but they've got some depth on the mound. If they have a true ace in Story, that may allow them to bump up. So, Matt, as I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at your notes as you go through this and start putting these teams together, pretty easy to go 35, 40, 45, 50 teams deep in the state and make arguments for guys that, hey, why aren't they in the top 25?
Yeah, there was you get to those final 3 to 5 teams that go in. There's a lot of teams that are bunched together, and put Holly Springs in at 25. And for me, the reason they got the nod is they're sitting in first place of their league.
Yep.
A lot of teams with similar records, or you need to go back through and you try to find some better wins, or teams may have good records, but then they've lost to a team that maybe we've seen or whatever that is maybe just okay. And I think they beat Middle Creek this year, and a lot of good baseball teams in that Raleigh area, and to be in first place, that put them over the top for me.
One of the big matchups this week would be number 1 East Forsyth taking on number 8 Huff in an out-of-conference matchup. So I don't know that you'll necessarily see everybody's ace in that game, but you're definitely going to see some lineups that have a chance to score some runs and have been tested throughout and really passed every test that they've seen. But both of those clubs, as we're shooting this on Wednesday, are going to be in our Atlantic Coast rankings. And so the Atlantic Coast is made up of North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. East Forsyth going to be number 1 on the East Coast. Wake Forest will come in at 2. Huff comes in at number 25. And so we've got 8 teams out of the state of North Carolina, out of that Mid-Atlantic region, that are getting rankings. And we've got D.H. Conley, Randleman, T.C. Roberson, Cornholders, some of those clubs right there knocking on the door. What do you expect on that matchup that's scheduled, I think, for Thursday with East Forsyth and Huff? And then also just talk a little bit about the depth of some of these other clubs that are making it in this Mid-Atlantic ranking as you're kind of looking at these rankings coming out.
Yeah, that's a big game, East Forsyth and Huff, but it'll be interesting to see how they play it. I know East Forsyth has Glenn in their league play last night or this week, and they beat them by 1 run. So how those teams manage their pitching staffs will be big in that game. And if maybe they throw their 3 or 4, or somebody may surprise you and throw an ace. I think Huff has Providence maybe coming up too this week,
Okay.
so a big game for them. And either way, no matter who wins or loses, I think it'll get a playoff atmosphere, and to put some of their lower level arms or arms on down the depth chart, get them some big innings and experience.
Let's say both clubs have 3, 4 arms that are committed. So it's not like when you go from 1 to 3, you're going to an average high school arm. You're still getting a guy that has a chance. Now, do they save? They roll their 3 into the back end of the bullpen, start their 4, and then try to close later. That'll be the interesting part with how they play it. And the other interesting part in games like that is when we don't throw our ace and maybe somebody else decides, hey, we can throw our guy. How does that team that's not throwing their ace attack that game early? Is it woe is me? Oh my gosh, we're not matching up. Or is it, hey, if we can get to the bullpen, we got an advantage. because we've got our guy behind. We're going to throw the fifth, sixth, and seventh. We're running in one of our better arms. If this guy can throw strikes and we can play defense and we can get out to an early lead, we have a chance to jump out and play from ahead. I think when we look at state tournament play, inevitably you're going to have one of these games where your one or your two doesn't pitch well. Now you got to win in a way where you're off script. The game's not going to go to plan like it has 80, 90% of the year.
Yeah, and two, that's two teams that could match up in the playoffs. So do they try to make sure they won't see the guys who they would throw in the playoffs, and or if they just
It's a
go
great
all
point.
in and try to win the big game?
That's a great point. Some mind games maybe from the coaching staffs because inevitably both those teams are going to be in. The seeding and all that. I don't think anybody's figured out how the seeds actually match up and how to manipulate any of that. So it could be we don't want them to get an early look at one of the arms that we may throw against them. But in those regional rankings, East Forsyth 1, Wake Forest 2, Middle Creek is at 5, Pinecrest is 6. New Hanover's at 18, J.H. Rose at 19. J.H. Rose coach Ronald Vincent won his 1,000th game at J.H. Rose last week. Matt, can you comprehend, one, being involved in 1,000 games, and two, getting 1,000 wins?
It's unbelievable. Um, to coach, first of all, to coach long enough to do that, and then to be good enough every year to win that many games. And we know the history there, and they've made some deep runs in the playoffs. But to do it over that span is impressive. And I think I saw he's the only North Carolina coach in any sport to win 1,000 games.
In one sport. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, especially with the way, and I don't want to say that kids have changed. I think the way parenting has changed, and I think that's cyclical over history. You have one generation is very difficult on their kids, and those kids go, well, I'm not going to be that way. I'm going to be the little bit more of the friend, and then all of a sudden those kids get to be older and they're going, that didn't work out for whatever reason. I'm going to be tough on my kids. And so there's kind of an ebb and flow to it. And through all that, Coach Vincent has remained a mentor and a friend and a coach and, to all those different types of players that have been through that program. Every year you show up, even with dwindling numbers in other places in the state in terms of, I can remember trying out at Millbrook my freshman year, and we have 85 players try out. And obviously there's more high schools now and the numbers are spread out. But, Rose always carries a lot of players. And I think that one of the reasons is Coach Vincent sees the good in having players around. He sees the good in those players. And even if they have just one tool, they just do one thing that may help this team advance, whether that's in the dugout or on the field, he keeps that player. We'll find a uniform for him. And so it is. You go watch them play on certain nights. It looks like they've got a small army in the dugout, and they're invading whatever city they're playing in. But hats off to Coach Vince. That's absolutely incredible. And unfathomable to me. My dad was a high school coach. I can't imagine him going through that for that long to get to that number of wins. And it's not necessarily a talent deal, because they've had some teams that haven't been necessarily as good over that course, but more years than not, they've played solid baseball. So, continuing with the regional rankings, East Irwin at 21, and obviously Huff, we talked about at 25. So, Matt, that brings us to our national rankings, something new from PBR this year. It's something that's drawn a lot of attention. It's something that's very difficult to do, especially when a lot of these higher level teams are willing to play good schedules, which is one of the reasons they attract good players. So you're not necessarily going to have some of your top teams just run the table, be 30-0. But for the first time ever, we get a team from North Carolina into the national rankings with East Forsyth at number 23. But it's not just one. We get two. Wake Forest at 25. Talk about just overall, not just those two programs, but overall the depth and talent in North Carolina and how that's kind of able to be perceived on a national level here.
Yeah, it's great to have the state represented in the national rankings, and two deserving clubs. Both talented rosters, tons of commits up and down, and not only the talent, but they seem to be gelling together and playing together. And Sometimes you get into those rankings, it's hard to get teams in the national rankings at times if you just look at records. Some teams will play a more challenging schedule and may take some losses early on, and it may make it harder to throw them in the rankings for the appearance of the record, and say, hey, how can this team be ranked with 4 losses or whatever? But both those teams are hot right now. Will definitely contend for the 4A state championship and deserving to be in there. And you could go on down probably another 3 or 4 teams in the state that could be in the national rankings as well.
Yeah, so when I did the NHSI, I was able to see, I think, 6 clubs that we had in the top 25 and then a bunch of other clubs that were in their regional rankings. And TC Roberson was obviously one of those for us here in North Carolina. Obviously, TC Roberson goes 0-4, but they're played a couple teams I think we had in the top 10 in the country and weren't overmatched, And I think sometimes we forget we would all love to have that guy on the front end of the rotation that's 90 to 96 with a hammer slider and excellent command and can throw changeup when he wants to. But guys that throw 86, 84, 88, can spin a breaking ball in the zone, can keep the ball down, and we play defense behind him. Those guys can get a lot of outs even against really good lineups. And so it's that ability, okay, how do we judge the depth? How do we judge their lineup? How do we judge them over 3 to 4 days? And I think that's where East Forsyth and Wake Forest come in. Now, yes, in the state of North Carolina, they have, ace type arms. When you start looking at the regional and national rankings, the arms are a little bit more diluted because I don't think they have guys that are going to be drafted this year. They may be drafted at some point. They're not going to be drafted this year in terms of what's rolling out on the bump. Whereas some of the teams at the top of the national rankings may have 2, maybe 3. And so you start to see a little bit of that depth issue there. But when East Forsyth and Wake Forest both can roll out 5, 6 arms that may play in college and get college hitters out, guys are going to be hitting at a high level for the next 3 to 4 years. They can get them out right now today. Plus, we play defense. Plus, both these clubs are showing an ability to score runs in bunches. It was an easy deal for us to start banging on the table going, hey, our region deserves at least 1, probably 3 to 4. And so we got 2 in this week, and we're going to continue to kind of bang the table, as these Virginia teams continue to play well, the Maryland teams continue to play well, and pushing as many of these clubs up and at least forcing, the decision makers in these rankings to take a good hard look at the roster and how they've been playing to determine where our region sits versus California, Georgia, and Florida.
Yeah, and get into the playoffs and see who makes some runs there, and hopefully the teams that we have high continue to win in the one and done format we have here in North Carolina.
Well, we'll bang the table differently if we get there. So we'll alert people what's going on. That's a whole nother podcast. Right now, I know people have heard me get on my high horse about that one in the past. So we'll leave that there. And Matt will transition to what has been a very hot topic around PBR, around D1Baseball.com, around college baseball in general. I'm not positive that everybody's gotten the news and that everybody's gotten the notes because I think NCAA rules are sent to college coaches and people that really kind of follow that news kind of path line. Sometimes players are left out on it, but 2 big things from the NCAA. The first one isn't going to have too big an effect, I don't think, but is official visits have changed. So now, as it has been for the last couple of years, juniors and seniors can take official visits beginning their junior year after September 1. But the biggest thing is that they're not going to be limited to 5. So they'll be unlimited in the number of official visits they take. It used to be the prospect could only take 5. The school, I think, in baseball is a number 25 for us. I think that was right. I think that number still is the same. But for the players, they're going to be able to take as many official visits as they want, limited to 1 per school. So if I live in Charlotte and I want to go to Wilmington and they pay for an official visit that junior year, I can't take another official visit my senior year to Wilmington. And Matt, as we're going through this, let's really quickly discuss or tell us the difference between an unofficial visit versus an official visit real quick.
Official visit, the school can can pay for pretty much all your costs. If you're going to visit Oklahoma State, they can, pay for your air travel, your transportation to and from the airport to campus, pick up your hotel, all your meals. When you go on an unofficial visit, it's out of your own pocket. You're paying for it, and um, unofficial visits have probably been more common the last few years with all the underclassmen committing and guys stopping in and visiting campuses and talking to the coaches on their own dime. And um, official visits have almost been a celebration of the class you signed,
Right.
going in your senior year, and schools bring in all their commitments one weekend, let them get to know each other and hang out, and more of a celebration versus trying to sell you on why you should go to school there.
Yeah, I know the NCAA stepped in a couple years ago and tried to eliminate some of the unofficial visits from freshmen and sophomore, starting them really, allowing them to start doing visits as a junior, trying to slow the pace down of recruiting, and it just didn't. What it actually saw is you saw limited communication between players and coaches, but the same number of offers going out, the same number of commitments. So there was less knowledge of who the coach is and who the player is and how they're going to merge and manage and marry and get along, but you still had the same number of commitments. So the NCAA came in and said this beginning on April 23rd, as we're shooting this on the 19th, we're just a couple days away. April 23rd, there will be no contact, no phone calls, no emails, no text messages, no have this coach, have this player call me. Nothing. But until you're a junior or getting ready to start your junior year, August 1, prior to your junior year, phone calls, text messages, emails, that stuff can commence. Um, this is a big change. So, eighth graders can't call them anymore. Seventh graders can't call them anymore. Freshmen in high school, I can't call Matt Payne and say, Matt, hey, you guys just had this guy at your workout. Can you have him call me? Can't do it anymore. We can't set those phone calls up. If a player picks up the phone and calls a coach, the coach can answer it. He can be polite, but he can say, I'm not allowed to talk to you at this point due to NCAA rules. We look forward to talking to you on August 1st, right prior to your junior year. That's it. Your initial thoughts on this rule as it was pushed through?
I think it's a good start. Um, I think it's going to go back to college coaches and the relationships they have with people like us and the travel ball orgs, and uh, those relationships are going to be very important again.
Yeah. So it's. I think obviously it's going to slow it down because if a player decides to commit and he blasts on Twitter, blessed, humbled, hashtag whatever, I'm committing to, and he's a freshman, it's going to set off all sorts of alarm bells. And that school is going to get dragged in front of their athletic director, their president, their conference. And ideally, they want to avoid the NCAA coming in. So it's going to kind of take those steps. But what's happened is this rule is following softball and volleyball, who have had it in for 3 to 5 years. And both those sports, from everybody I've talked to, and I've made numerous phone calls since this rule was announced, loved this rule. It's slowed it down. Now it's made August 1 a complete nightmare, but it has slowed it down. It has forced communication after that, after they become juniors. So, in softball, they had sixth and seventh graders making commitments. Can you imagine being on the phone with a sixth grader and talking about their future and what they want to study and the things that a college campus offers a sixth grader? I mean, they're really, you're recruiting, and Sammy Esposito, our guy in South Carolina, talked about it yesterday. You're recruiting and dealing with 14-year-olds to 24-year-olds. If you were doing all that, that was mind blowing. It's a 10-year gap of how you're communicating with people that you're trying to make part of your organization. So the rules designed to slow it down. So let's walk through this, Matt. I'm going to put you. You're at let's start as a junior college or a Division II coach. And now the NCAA, and eventually this rule may get to the Division II level. It's not there yet. It's this Division I rule. You're a junior college coach. How does this affect your recruiting day to day, year to year?
I don't think it changes a whole lot. I
Right.
think um, it may make things happen a little bit later for those guys. I think there'll still be a lot of kids that have the Division I dream of, thinking with the rules being pushed back that, that opportunity may still be there for them, and maybe be make them later committing to a junior college or Division two, but I don't think it changes it for those guys a whole lot.
And just to give you a little idea, in North Carolina, since we've started PBR in this area, I think it's now we're on 6 years. Every single senior class has had 50% or more of the players that go on to play college baseball commit after November of their senior year. So again, more players commit after November of their senior year than prior to that date. With our junior college guys that we tracked this year, we only had like 4 or 5 junior college commits prior to the early signing period, if I remember correctly. Definitely going into the fall, and then now it starts to pick up. And I think junior colleges have to work through their roster. How many? And they know the sophomore slots will be there, but how many of our freshmen may get a chance to move on? How many of our freshmen may be draft picks? And so a lot of their roster building is late. Plus, they're waiting to see the transfer portal. It's better for them to get a 19-year-old freshman than it is to go get a 16-year-old high school player and figure out what they have a better idea what the 19-year-old is going to be. The body's a little bit more physical. He's a little bit more mature. He understands, hey, last chance. I already had my 4-year shot. I got to get through the 2-year to get back to a 4-year. And so I think from a junior college standpoint, you're exactly right. Doesn't change anything that they're doing. Let's move to a mid-major. And I'm not a big fan of that term, but we've got 16 schools in the state of North Carolina that are Division I schools. Let's take that middle tier to lower tier of those schools. How does the new rule affect their recruiting?
Uh, that'll be interesting. I think they've those the smaller Division one schools, or however you want to say it, have they put their classes together later. I think they're still out identifying players and learning the classes, but the pressure or speed for them to get offers out and get classes as filled has not been as fast as the Power Fives or the bigger schools that have been dialing in on eighth graders and ninth graders the last few years.
Yeah, so schools that fit this tier, not playing in the Power Five conferences, not perennially a regional team or a team that's got a chance to host at the regional level. Those are the schools we're talking about. And what typically those schools, we'll see some that have 2 to 3 to 4 commitments in the junior class, maybe 1 to 2 in the sophomore class, but they're going to sign 12 to 15. And so a majority of what they're doing is after really June 1st, moving into the senior year. It really picks up in this state around the state games. That organization does a good job of that event. Most coaches are there. They see that event. That rolls right into our trips to Atlanta and to Lake Point. And then boom, we can knock out the evals and start really throwing the hammer down on who do we want on our roster. The other part with those guys is it gives them a chance to evaluate players that may be a little bit more late developing. The 6'4", 230-pound eighth grader who runs a 6'8", that one's easy to evaluate. He's an outlier. But the guy in that same class that as an eighth grader was 5'8", 95 pounds, and now as a junior is 6'1", 145 pounds, and you're looking at his dad who's 6'3", 215 pounds. Well, now we get to see that maturation process with that player. And so I think that's important for those schools as they're not missing on those guys because they can't live in the portal the way maybe a Power 5 can. So, Matt, let's take it now to the Power 5. What are some of the things that you see being drastically different for the Power 5 and the way they go about their lives?
I think, I mean, it's intended for them to spend less time out watching eighth graders and freshmen play and, you know, getting classes done so far in advance. Um, I think, a lot of those schools will still be on those kids and work to find ways around it and try to, in their eyes, stay ahead of the curve. I think you'll see college camps get a lot bigger again. Uh, trying to get kids on campus that way, and you get kids to camp, you can talk to them, get a feel for how they go about their business and their personality. Where I feel like the last few years camps haven't. They've still been there and they've still been important, but You could go out, watch those kids play, and call their coach after the game and say, have so and so call me and get it done. So I know what the rules intended for, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and to see if those guys actually dial back on some of the younger classes and less offers out. I think even those schools have done well with some late commitments they've got. The
Right.
guys that have been late developers. A lot of times those guys are the really big impact guys for those schools as well. So I know it's designed to slow it down. I'm sure it will some. I don't know if the early commits and some of that will be completely over with though.
Well, so a little bit of what's happened in volleyball and softball, just talking to some coaches. Obviously, everybody wants to get ahead, and it's a very competitive sport with, especially with pay. I mean, coaches are being paid a lot of money to win, and they're looking for advantages. How can I get to better players? And one of those advantages has been getting to them earlier. I'm first. Here's your offer. I need to know in or out. And the player really doesn't get a chance to go through the recruiting process and study what he may want. He just knows that a school that he's heard of that plays on TV that has a really good football program has come in and said, I got 48 hours to make a decision. I got 2 weeks to make a decision. You know, what's happened in volleyball and softball, talking to some coaches, is as those competitive types of minds were trying to work around this rule, the NCAA quietly dropped the hammer on them. Keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to come in and do a full investigation, which means we're turning your football program upside down, and we're turning your basketball program upside down, and we're telling those two coaches we're here because of you. If you want to keep doing that, this is what's going to happen. We're not saying you're breaking a rule. We don't know, but we've heard things, and when we hear something, it opens up everything in that athletic department, and that kind of shut it down. Um, talking to some recruiting coordinators at the Power Five level, right now they're recruiting 4 to 5 classes. They're having to recruit their senior class to make sure, one, those guys show up on campus if they're draft guys, or two, they have a chance to play there. They kind of want to know before the fall. So they're still evaluating those guys, and they can kind of shift through the transfer portal and make some late decisions if they have to. They don't want to cut guys, but they kind of know some guys that may end up in the transfer portal or may end up at a junior college, and they can help those guys out sooner. The junior class, obviously, similar situation. The sophomore class is where a lot of those guys are trying to get ahead. It's not a ton of eighth graders. That's like a 0.5%. But for the Power Five programs, for programs that are perennially in the top 25, we see that sophomore class where it starts to kind of transition and ratchet it up. You start seeing, that top 3 to 5% of athlete in the class. Those are the guys coming off the board, and those are the schools are going to. For these coaches, they will be recruiting the senior class and the junior class because they're allowed to. They're allowed to build those relationships, allowed to talk to those guys. They're going to be out watching the sophomore class because they need to know when we get to August 1, who am I calling? The freshman class, the eighth graders, nothing. Don't need to. If I run into one, great. I'm going to have my alumni are going to call me about players. High school coaches, we have a good relationship. They're going to call me about players. Matt and Brandon do a great job. We're going to check their list. I'm going to pick their brain. I'm going to follow them. They're going to have an idea. So when I get to the sophomore year, I'm going to have, if I need 15 players, I'm going to have 50. Pretty easily. I've never had to step foot off this campus, and I already got a list. And that's kind of what those guys are looking for. And I think that's, where, and again, I feel like we do a really good job. I feel like we're a trusted and valued source of information. I don't think we're a source of decision making. I don't think anybody's going, Matt liked that guy offering. I would hope they're not doing that, but I do think that they're going, hey, Matt liked that guy. We need to go see him. And so if there's a freshman that's out there that's like that, he then goes on their watch list for sophomores. They can make a decision, and then they can get to August 1 and start plowing through like that. So now for these recruiting coordinators, that 4-year split is really, or that 5 or 6 years that they recruit, is really down to 3 years. And again, we've got 3 coaches allowed to go on the road. I think their ability to get evaluations on players, their ability to watch players play 5, 6, 10, 15 times before they have to make a decision. We're going to start separating programs by who can evaluate and who can't versus who gets on the phone the earliest. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think what'll be interesting to me is those guys have done it this way for so long. Will some of those guys let themselves slow down? Like I just pulled up our some of our freshman class right now, and I think there's 16 to 18 freshmen in North Carolina committed right now. So this time next year, that 27 class, will there be no commits? Will guys still be committed through going to camps and things like that? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so
designed to slow it down.
you've mentioned camps a couple times. That was the one that got some of the other sports because they would bring the kids in after camp. They're not supposed to have any contact with them. So if at a camp, kid goes to a camp, anything I do with Matt Payne at a camp, I have to do with the whole camp. So we all know the rule in the past. That was the rule, but I could bring Matt into my office and say, "Hey, we're not doing this, but we are doing this." If that word gets out at all, I'm just telling you, I've heard the NCAA, they're not coming in and making a big deal out of it. They're just saying, we can be there on a Wednesday and we're not investigating your program. But let your football coaches know to have all these things in order. And the athletic, it will stop. Because I don't care how good Tennessee or Ole Miss or Florida are rolling. The athletic department doesn't want anybody in there investigating the football team. Not that they're doing anything wrong, but how many times has the NCAA gone into an institution and found nothing? It doesn't happen. They're going to find
I mean, I
something
think,
because the rule book's freaking this thick. All of us have broken rules.
but how much could you really go in and punish Georgia football, Alabama football, Florida football for what baseball and softball coaches are doing? Because then you
And
talk
so
about
that's
losing a
uh,
lot of money.
well, the NCAA doesn't care because the NCAA gets the same amount of money. Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to lose. What happens is the conference steps in first, and so the way it's been handled is coaches in those conferences they don't go to the NCAA. They go to their school. Their school calls the other school. We know what you're doing. Don't do it. It continues to happen. We go to the conference. The conference then comes in and goes, let me tell you what the next step is. And it's going to stop. It's going to stop right now so we don't get to that next step. I'm just I talking to coaches who've gone through it, it ended right there. And I know it's two sports, but softball's making money in certain aspects, not the money football's making. Volleyball's making money in some places, not to the point football's making though. So I think the rule, if it's enforced properly, has a chance to really take off. The other part is how many freshmen do you trust? If I make you a secret offer and you commit, you're not going to tell anybody until
But
until August 1. You're
there's
just going to hold it. You're not going to tell a single soul. It's going to get out.
then why not just put in the rule you can't commit? I
Well,
mean,
that's the
because there's still
point.
no but I mean, I go back to when the early recruiting. I think it started with South Carolina back in the day. They all of a sudden committed a couple kids, and it was just them, and then everybody else, kind of gradually went to recruiting earlier and earlier and earlier.
Yeah,
So
but
if
there
somebody,
were no rules around the way they were forcing conversation. So the rule is zero contact. You cannot have no contact. You can't make an offer. You can't talk to the kid. So how is a freshman committing if you have no contact?
so you don't think people will offer at camps?
I don't. I think they may try, but if that word gets out that they're doing it, I'm just telling you the position the conferences have taken on this rule is because the rule has a chance to be good. It has a chance to help the student athlete. I think it has a chance to help evaluators and programs as well because you're not going to be cycling through kids before they get there. So you're dead on right though. There are going to be people pushing the issue. It's just a matter of
I'm,
when.
I mean, I'm all for the no early commits, it being a slower process. I think it's better for kids. It's better for evaluators. You go back and
Good
how
evaluators.
everybody's trying to, yeah, good evaluators. how everybody's trying to find an edge, and will some people let themselves slow down and follow the rule, or try to live in the gray area as many people have over the years?
Yeah, and that's I think you're still going to see that, and you're still going to have programs trying to, because there are programs that know if I'm matched up and it's mano a mano, and we're going head to head with this other program, well, they're in a heavyweight class, I'm in a flyweight class. I'm maybe pound for pound the greatest flyweight to have ever lived. I'm still not getting in a ring with a heavyweight and winning. And I think that's the process that some of the schools are going to have to figure out. And then the evaluation part is huge. I think for guys that can really evaluate and the ability now to put 3 and 4 and 5 evaluations, plus maybe the ability to communicate on August 1st and have some leeway in terms of communicating with them for a little bit before they have to make a decision, you're going to see programs excel because they have good evaluators. And there are a lot of mid majors that have that we're back. We lost connection there for a minute. You're gonna see some really good evaluators take programs higher level. And you think about Dallas Baptist. Dallas Baptist doesn't recruit a ton early. They're not getting a bunch of freshmen and sophomore, but they're putting evaluations on guys, and they have the money and the means to go out and see a lot of guys to put those evaluations on them. And then I'm not going to mention schools in the state, but there's schools in this state with excellent evaluators that I think those coaches are going to thrive when this rule is put in place, because it doesn't mean they have to be the best guy on the phone or the first guy on the phone anymore. They're going to get to the right player. So that brings me to August 1st. Now, remind me, when you coached, was July 1 the date? Did you ever have to deal with the July 1 free for all?
It was July 1, but I still felt like you had contact with those guys by having them call you before. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like your true first to, like, as a player that day, your first time talking to those guys for the most part, where the coaching standpoint, you still had guys call you before the July 1 date.
So when I started, July 1 was the date. You weren't we didn't have the budget to be any further ahead. But I would be somewhere in Atlanta trying to put together the schedule of games I'm going to go see in Atlanta. Plus, here's the 40 guys I got to call. And who am I calling first thing in the morning? Who am I calling at noon? I've got these 3 guys are on the same team. What order am I calling them in? Because it matters. And I tell a story. Old Dominion called Justin Verlander at 12:01, July 1st. They'd send him a letter. Be prepared. We're going to be the very first phone call. We're going to make you the highest offer. And they did both of those things, and he committed very shortly thereafter. But that July 1 date used to be an absolute free-for-all. How many people have you talked to? What are you thinking about? Because the kids think they have an idea of where they land in the scope of recruiting, but a lot of them really didn't know. Am I a Power 5? Am I a high major? Am I a mid-major? Am I a D2? You get a decent feel, but there were still Division I guys out there that did not get a single phone call on July 1. There will be Division I guys that don't get a single phone call on August 1. And then you'll have guys that got 30, 40 phone calls on August 1st that see their, what they think their level is, and it'll start to drop as coaches get to know them. So it's going to be interesting to see how quickly that August 1, and we may just be sitting in the office fielding. We won't be in the office. We may be down at future games. We may have a 10 up, and we may have the best juniors in the country just rotating through the 10 every 2 minutes with hats on the table, and this is where I'm going, and whatever. But that August 1 date's got a chance to be a circus in a good
So
way.
do you think the phone call date? I know it'll be important, but what about that first wave of kids you bring on campus for that first official visit?
Yeah, but, so
Do
you
you
got a
put more?
month.
You know, do you, as a player, if that school's really interested in me, then I should be in their first group of official visits.
And
If
this
I'm
is
if
where
I'm on down the road, then
right.
where do I line up for those guys?
And this is where players have a little bit of the power. Because a player can say, I appreciate your phone call on August 1st. I've got 3 visits set up already. I'm taking at least 5. I'd like for you to be one of them. And that gives me a month. I can't commit on August 1st because I'm taking visits. Do you really think I'm a good enough player to wait a month for? Because if so, I'll be there. I'll be there September 2nd. I'll be there September 5th. whatever. But the players have a little bit of power. You see this in football some, where the higher level players, excuse me, they can leverage who's recruiting them to stretch their time out just a little bit. I can throw up, here's the five I'm considering. Here's my top seven. I just saw that one the other day. And it gives coaches a better feel for what's going on, allows some other coaches to move on, and then allows those seven to freaking go heads up, head to head, and set visits up and figure out where that guy fits. I think initially the players won't realize they have that power. They're going to be so excited to hear from schools, and schools are going to be dropping offers. I think you're going to see a bunch of kids commit August 1st. Now, how much communication have they had prior to that? That'll be the gray area. How in the world can you commit when you're on the first day you talk to a guy? But I think as players realize we have some power in this, especially the higher level player, that top 3 to 5% guy, you're going to see more schools having to really battle through the course of official visits and creating a dynamic visit for players to get them to say, yes, this is where I want to go to school.
Yeah, I think from a player standpoint too, if you don't commit August 1st, you can go enjoy some official visits, and it'd be interesting to see too what schools spend the money on those again. I know they've spent it for their committed guys, but it's been more of a celebration. Now you're bringing this kid in, trying to get him in your program. How much above and beyond are you going to go for those guys? And maybe those football weekends will get really exciting again.
Well, and football scheduling will matter. Who's
Yep.
got home games. If you don't have a home game from September 1 to September 25, are you screwed? Yeah, you just what are we going to do with them? Are they or what? And most places will have things for them to do, but I think you're right. I think you'll see schools try to separate themselves in the way they do the visits. I think you'll see a little bit more of the football, really trying to turn it into a weekend where they can see themselves immersed in that college atmosphere. But we also have to balance, most baseball players have a high academic and have high priorities towards what degree they want to go get and what their lifestyle is going to be when baseball's over, whether that's in 4 years or whether that's in 20 years. And so as much as we have to make this fun, we also have to sell the aspect of what do you get a chance to have out of the university. And there's going to be some balancing acts there, and there's going to be some skewing. Bringing Matt Payne on a visit one weekend and Brandon Hall on a visit the next weekend. They may be two completely different visits, just because of what our mindsets are and maturity level, and what we're looking for out of the visit. So our place is able to adapt to the player, or do they just have a single? This is our visit. Let's have some fun.
I think they'll adapt to the player.
You would
I
hope.
think Georgia Alabama football game be a pretty good sale though. Bring some kids in for that.
I,
you know,
if it was in Athens, I would commit. So, well, for our people out there viewing, we've got more stuff coming on this. I know we're going to be in touch with all the players in our database. We've got another podcast that I did with Sammy Esposito and Shooter Hunt should be dropping here soon. If it didn't drop prior to this, we'll have more things coming out on recruiting essentials. We're 1 week into trying to really examine what's going on. I think Matt brings up some great points in terms of the competitiveness of coaches. Those guys like making money and like where they're at. And so how is that going to play into it? And our guys going to find ways to stay competitive. We've got, a couple years before it really kind of plays out. We really have a good feel because in North Carolina, I think most of the guys that were sophomores that were going to commit really early, I think most of those guys are off the board. And they're kind of rushing towards that August 1. But that freshman class will be the one. So as that freshman class gets to August 1 prior to their junior year, we'll have a better feel for how this is really playing out. You can track all of this on PBR. If you like the podcast, remember to hit that subscribe button. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about. If there's things on this issue you have questions about, feel free to hit us up, comments below, or directly contact us through Twitter or through emails, all fine. Matt, final word, NCAA rules, thumbs up or thumbs down from the NCAA in terms of what they're doing and what they're trying to do?
it's a step in the right direction. I think it can definitely be good. I think there's more that to get it how they truly want it to be. I think there's got to be some more rules put in place.
And there you have it. Well, for Matt Payne, I'm Brandon Hall. This is the Prep Baseball Report of North Carolina podcast, and we'll see you at the field this week, if not later on. Thanks for tuning in.